Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to allow people to join for a second and then we'll get started. All right. Well, I think we have allowed people to join, and we'll likely get some others joining as well, but we'll just get started. So good afternoon. Welcome to the do's and don'ts of employment investigations. You have a great team here to discuss this topic today. I'll let everyone introduce themselves and I will start. My name is Laura Pfeiffer. I have been with the firm for 29 years. I co-chair our employment department and I practice in the area of both employment counseling and employment litigation. And as part of my practice, I also get hired to do third-party investigations and have done a number of them in the last several years, in addition to working with clients and in conducting investigations themselves, or also in retaining a third party to do the investigation and then counseling the client about that. So, but I'll let Amy introduce herself next.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Dayhoff. I have been with the firm for 22 years now, not as long as Laura, but for a long time. I practice in both the employment and commercial litigation space. I chair the employment litigation subgroup here at the firm. And I also do quite a bit of employment counseling, especially for some of I play a role as outside general counsel for several large companies in the Twin Cities. And Laura and I do quite a bit of tag teaming in terms of one functioning as the investigator for some clients while the other one then provides legal advice for the client. So we've done quite a bit of that over the years as well. And I will now let Stephen introduce himself.
Thank you. So I don't have 20 years of experience, but my name is Stephen Vogel. I'm a second-year litigator here at Winthrop and Weinstein, and I'm also part of the employment litigation subgroup, which is why I'm here. So, and then I'll pass it on to Olivia.
My name is Olivia Cooper, and I am a part of our general commercial litigation team as well as our employment litigation team. I've been practicing for 9 years, but I've been at Winthrop for 4 years.
My name is Abby Sokolowski. This is my first year practicing, and I just started at Winthrop in September, and I'm also a part of the litigation group as well as the employment subgroup.
All right, so we talked as a group to determine sort of the best way to present this topic to you. We know that a lot of you, either as in-house general counsel or HR professionals, are handling investigations internally. And so we wanted to give you practical tips on how to go about conducting investigations. And we thought one of the best ways to illustrate that was to go through various scenarios and tricky situations that have come up in investigations that we've been a part of or that some of us have handled, with ideas of kind of the good way to do things and the bad way to do things. And so we're going to start with, and they're all kind of broken up by topic, right? So the first topic we're going to go over is confidentiality. And things that might come up about confidentiality and investigation and ways that you might handle that well and not well. And so we won't tell you which ones are the bad scenarios versus the good scenarios. We'll kind of do a recap at the end, but you can see what you think as to whether you think it's bad or good. Also, if there are questions throughout the webinar, you can feel free to put those questions in the chat and we will try to address them as we go, time permitting. So again, like just to give the lay of the land, we're going to go through various scenarios, kind of topically related. And then at the end of when we're done with the scenarios, kind of talk about other things that come up with investigations or logistical things to consider. So all right, I'm going to turn it over to Abby and Olivia to go through the confidentiality scenarios.
Hi, Olivia. Thank you for meeting with me.
This is all confidential, right? I want to make sure I tell you something, but I need this to remain confidential.
This is not a confidential conversation. We're investigating allegations that have been made against you.
Well, who will have access to everything that I'm saying then?
We can't control that.
Well, then I can't talk to you then.
See,
All right, so do you want to recap like each one or any kind of?
Yeah,
Take
well,
up
I think
points.
that, why don't we go through the others and then we can talk about which ones are, I don't want to say the wrong way, but maybe not the preferable way to do them versus which one we think is more appropriate. So we'll do scenario number 2 under confidentiality.
Right, so there's 3, so then you can figure out which ones you think went well and ones that maybe could have gone better.
Thank you for meeting with me.
This is all confidential, right? I really need to tell you something, but I need it to remain confidential.
Yes, everything you tell me is completely confidential. I promise I won't tell anyone anything that you tell me here.
Good, because I can't have anyone else knowing this.
Okay, scene.
Right.
And now we'll move to the third scenario under the
Right.
confidentiality.
Thanks for meeting with me today. I know this can be overwhelming, but I just want to meet with you and hear your side of the story.
Okay, well, I want to tell you something, but I need it to be kept confidential. I don't want my boss to find out what I'm telling you. I'm worried about being retaliated against.
We will try to keep what you say as confidential to the extent we possibly can. But we have to get to the greatest side of the story and may need to reveal certain information in order to do so. I also want to emphasize retaliation is not permitted pursuant to our policy and handbook. If you believe you've been retaliated against, please contact me immediately.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining this to me.
Okay, so we've had 3 scenarios, and I'm sure a lot of you out there joining us today have had this very situation happen. Confidentiality is a real buzzword. It's the people who are being investigated or have come forward with a complaint,
Or are just witnesses.
or just
Right,
witnesses,
like witnesses.
exactly, are always very concerned about this and they want promises of confidentiality. So the
Yeah.
question is,
I mean, this comes up all the time.
all the time. And I'm sure those of you that are out there have had this happen numerous times. And so what is the right way to handle this situation? Obviously, the first scenario in which you heard Abby and Olivia, Abby as the investigator or the internal investigator, HR professional says that
We
they can't control
what we
anything.
have access to, like, it's just tough, you know?
Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah, and obviously,
That's bad. So.
right, we all know that we should not do that. And then the second scenario obviously was complete confidentiality. They won't tell anybody anything. We also know we shouldn't and can't do that.
Right, you should not promise complete confidentiality.
Exactly. And so, that there's an issue then, right, that can present itself on whether or not that person then will agree to talk to you. We can get into that in a second. So obviously that leaves us with a third scenario, right? That Abby and Olivia did, which is, emphasizing that retaliation is not permitted. And I am assuming all of you have that in your handbooks out there, that all of your employees have signed and acknowledged. If not, call us because we need to change those for you. But that's one of the things that you need to reiterate to them. We find this happening a lot. People are very concerned about retaliation and what they're going to say, and so you need to reassure them. But you also cannot promise them that it's going to remain confidential. I'm sure all of you know that out there, but you need to try to put them at ease as much as you can, and obviously limit the information that is shared on a need to know basis. And Laura, I don't know if you
Well,
want
yeah,
to join.
because I mean, if a complaint is made about somebody else, like, and sometimes there gets to be some confusion, especially like with maybe 2 people were peers and then the person got promoted later, one of them. And so now somebody's in management. And so they're wanting to just vent to their friend, but
Right.
yet then once it gets to someone in management, and this is a good thing for supervisor training too, is to make sure that those supervisors know that if they're told something, that they can't, if the friend is saying like, I'm just venting to you, I don't want you to do anything, like, I don't want you to go to the other person. None of that is legally relevant once it goes to management. And so you just need to try to tell, and then you need to get that other person's side of the story. So the idea that you're just gonna like lodge a complaint and then about a person and then not have that person be able to tell their side of the story,
Mhm.
that is gonna need to happen. So that person will need to get the disclosure of that information. But what I try to do then is to just lean into, listen, like you've come to me for a reason. Like we want the workplace to be free from harassment and discrimination. Just to back up a second, the law requires if there is an allegation of discrimination or harassment that the company look into that and take prompt remedial action, which in often case does involve doing an investigation, which is what we're talking about, right? So it's like, we want this to be a good place to work, like we'll keep it as confidential as possible, and then really focus on reassuring them about retaliation not being permitted, and to come to you or another contact within HR if they believe they have been retaliated against, so that you can address that immediately.
And Laura, what if you have this, right, and it goes just fine, and then one of the witnesses, it doesn't matter who it is, calls you back and calls the HR professional who's conducted this investigation and says, I want to retract my statements.
Yeah, so that has happened, right, where somebody was forthright or forthcoming with the investigator, and then like goes home, sleeps on it, and is like, no way,
I should have
shouldn't
made a
have said all of
mistake.
that,
Exactly.
right? And so there isn't an actual ability to retract something, right? Like once it has been told to management, it's part of what you know. And so again, in that instance, there isn't really an ability to retract things, but I really appreciate you speaking to me and being candid and forthright in your responses to me. And so, and again, then like retaliation isn't permitted. I assume the reason why you want to retract this is because that's your concern, and it isn't permitted. And so if there is anything that you feel like you've been retaliated against, please just contact me immediately so that I can address it, right? And just try to reassure them that way, because, like somebody's, a witness's desire about what should happen. You maybe want to ask what their desired outcome is, but like if they say, don't do something, or I'm retracting it, or that, I'll just say, I never told you that. All of that is not legally relevant. So once you know something, you know it, and then you just need to take action that's appropriate given the situation.
Exactly. Okay. Why don't we move on to scenario number 2? These are, so Olivia and Stephen are going to be playing out these 3 scenarios, and this is on cross-examination / questioning.
We got 2 scenarios for this one.
Okay, great. Thank you for the correction.
Thank you for meeting with me today. Let's dive right in. You know you've been here, or you're here today because your coworker accused you of harassment, right?
No, that's false. I didn't do anything.
Well, that's not what your coworkers are saying. You told your coworker that you liked her pants, didn't you?
Yes, but I didn't mean anything by it.
Well, you specifically pointed out that you thought they looked sharp on her though, right?
Yes, but again, I only meant it as a compliment because she has good fashion taste.
Well, she took it as you were looking at her butt. So that's what we're doing. That's what you were doing, weren't you?
No, I wasn't, and that's not what happened.
Okay, end of scene. All right, scenario number 2.
Thank you so much for meeting with me today. Do you understand why we are meeting here?
Yes,
Can you tell me from your perspective why we are here today?
I'm pretty sure someone accused me of harassment.
Can you tell me your side of the story about what happened?
Sure. So I've been looking for Christmas present ideas for my wife, and so I've been paying attention to some of the fashion of my female coworkers. I think they have good taste and a similar style to my wife. So one day, my coworker, Abby, had on these really sharp looking black pants that had a wide leg and a cuff at the bottom. And I told her I really liked them and I thought they were sharp.
Why did you say specifically that they were sharp?
I meant looking sharp in general, not specifically on her body. I was hoping she could tell me where I could purchase a similar pair for my wife for Christmas, but she got so upset and went away before I could explain myself.
So where did this conversation happen between the two of you?
In the hallway outside our offices are a few doors down from each other.
Were there any other people around during this conversation?
I think our coworker, whose office right next to me, might have heard it. I think she was there and her door was open.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, end of scene. So obviously, I'm sure that you understand what we're getting at is the types of questions that you should be, how you should approach, I guess, the questions you're asking during the investigation. We would refer to me as the litigator, would refer to scenario 1 as cross-examination questions, right? You've gone in there, it looks like you have an agenda. You already know what the outcome of the investigation, you've already made a decision in your mind, what's happened here, and that's how you ask the questions. And that's obviously not what you should be doing. You are there to try to get the facts and then ascertain what those are and make some credibility determinations and then go from there. So the second scenario was focused more on approaching your investigations with open-ended questions, right? You're there as a fact finder. You are trying to get to the bottom of what happened without walking in and an accusatory tone. And like I said, predetermined decisions about what you think has happened and what the outcome is going to be.
You want to present as a neutral, right? So that you are asking open-ended questions. Like I tell people to think about who, what, where, when, why, right? And to listen and to see what they have to say, right? And I think that's true. Like, let's say in an easier example, maybe like 7 people heard Stephen say these words, right? Like, so sometimes I think people say, well, what's the point of talking to Stephen? Like 7 other people told me that. And so why do I have to ask him what he said? Because part of it, my response would be that you want to get him to say what he's going to say, right? And if he says something like, I never said that at all, like they're all lying, that's fine. You can get him to say that, but then you may just determine if all the 7 other people said something different and they're in alignment, that you determine Stephen not to be credible, right? So, but you want to get him to say that though, right? Instead of like putting words in his mouth or, and it may be again that like in this example, I think, it really wasn't in conflict. Like it was, he agreed, he said
Absolutely.
the words as they were alleged. It's just that from his standpoint, there was different context around there that he wanted the company to appreciate, right?
Absolutely. And one of the other things that is important that Laura brought up just now, in which you saw at the end of the second scenario, when Olivia asked, were there any other people around, right? And so that's another thing that you need to be thoughtful about when you're conducting these, right? And again, the open-ended questions, because you want to discern if there are others that need to be interviewed as part of this process. So you have a full and robust investigation. And so by him saying, oh yeah, I think my coworker may have heard it because she had her door open, then you should be going and talking to that individual too, or if they had been standing in a hallway.
If it's in conflict, right?
Exactly.
Because again, kind of harkening back to the first scenario on confidentiality, right? So if really what was complained about, I assume Abby complained about the comment about the pants. And so if what Abby and Stephen are saying is the same, and you are trying to keep this as confidential as possible, right? So you don't need other employees knowing that Abby was uncomfortable with Stephen's comment, right? Or like for Stephen to have that, oh, people are complaining about him, is that if what was said is not in conflict, then you probably don't need to talk to
Right.
that other coworker,
Mhm.
right? And so you want to be judicious about who you're talking to, and only talking to them if it is important, right? So if it ended up being he said, she said, then, and that other person maybe had firsthand information about what was said, then talking to that other individual would make sense.
Right, great. Okay, so we're gonna move on to scenario number 3. And these scenarios relate to recording of the investigation. And we have 3 scenarios for this one, and this is going to be Stephen and Abby.
And then for this scenario, we'll assume that it's a one-party consent state, meaning that only one person in the conversation needs to essentially consent to record that conversation. Right.
Or it's that like, if you're a party to the conversation, right?
Right.
So
You can do
so
it
if
unilaterally.
you're part of the conversation, you can record it, if you're part of it. So because you're the one consenting.
Exactly.
Thank you for meeting with me.
I want to make sure you don't twist my words, so I'll be recording our conversation.
Recording? We don't allow that here.
Well, I want to be sure my words aren't misinterpreted and I have the right to record.
Look, that's not our problem. You are not allowed to record. If you're worried about being misinterpreted, maybe you shouldn't be talking to us at all. This isn't an interrogation. It's a simple interview. Do you have something to hide?
No, and that's exactly why I want to record. I'm leaving.
Okay. Actually, there's only 2 scenarios here. Sorry, I misspoke. Okay, so that's the end. We'll go to scenario number 2.
Thanks for meeting with me. I will not be recording this conversation, and I would expect you will not be either. Are we in agreement?
Well, I want to make sure you don't twist my words, so I plan to record our conversation.
I understand. I think in that case, I will also begin recording this conversation. That way we both have access to a record of the conversation.
Okay. So this, one of the things that Stephen brought up, is that, that was in a one-party recording state. And so I think it's important for all of you to know, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, there are about, let's see.
Team versus.
There are, yeah, so the one-party states, including Minnesota, there are about 32 of those. So there are far more that are one party. The 2-party consent states, as we're referring to them, there are about 18. However, there are some nuances to some of those. So for instance, in Oregon, you can, it's a one party if it's on the phone. But if it's an in-person communication, it's 2-party consent. So I think it's really important when you're doing these investigations, and some of you have various locations that are not in Minnesota, understanding what the law is with regard to that as you're moving forward, and if this is something that's requested during your investigation. Okay. So, and if there are any questions on specific states, I've got that information in front of me. So if you guys wanted to put something in the chat, we can make sure to answer that for you. Okay, so Laura, obviously, so we've got the 2 scenarios that we just went over. Abby and Stephen just went over. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, so one question came up. Do you have to announce that you're recording? You do not. So if it's one-party recording state and you're a party to that conversation, right? So like, again, just to make sure that that's not confusing. So if Amy and I are talking,
Yes.
I can have my phone in my pocket and record the conversation because she and I are talking. If Stephen is in the room and is not speaking, or just is nearby, but close enough where he could surreptitiously record us, he can't record that in a one-party recording state because he's not speaking. He's not party to the conversation. He's just surreptitiously recording it.
So let's say a good example would be, you're maybe thinking, why would there be a third person in the investigation room, right? If it were, well, if there's, and we'll get into some of this with another scenario, but if there's, a parent who's there with an underage child, or not even an underage child, but a child that one of their kids that needs some support, or if there's a spouse,
Right, or
Right?
just with virtual investigations,
Yeah.
like, sometimes you don't know who's on camera, but that person cannot have that, they can't legally record it, right? So I mean, a couple things. If you are investigating and you're in a one-party recording state, I think that you need to assume that you might be recorded. So I think that in most of the time, if I say I'm not recording, and then my expectation is that you are not either, are we in agreement? I'd say that that solves it most of the time,
Right.
right? And I feel like that there isn't much more conversation about that.
Mhm.
So I think that if it was against your policy, which I think also came up,
We do, yeah.
and you're saying, we're not permitting this. That one approach is to just, say, you know what, I'm gonna have to reflect on that further because that's not how we manage this, and that is, so are you telling me that you are refusing to cooperate and to participate in this interview unless we're recording? And they say, that's right, you know
Mhm.
what, it's my right legally, and I'm gonna record it, or I'm not talking to you. Then I think you could pivot
Yeah.
and just say, you know what, we're gonna have to conclude this for now, and I'm gonna need to get additional, gonna have to partner with somebody else on how to approach this. And then, talk internally within your organization about how to approach it. Maybe contact outside legal if necessary. And so, I mean, I think that if you are telling them that and they are insisting on that,
Mhm.
I would probably terminate the interview and then get additional advice about how to handle that before I would move forward, right?
Yeah, and one of the things, we
And
actually.
maybe you decide that you're both recording if it's an important enough witness.
Right. That's
Right.
what I was gonna say. I mean, I think that obviously you'll want to have some conversations internally about the policy. And okay, are we gonna make an exception or what are we doing? Based upon if this is a really important witness. Right? You could, and we actually talked about this a couple days ago during our prep for this on whether or not, hey, would it make sense if you're really adamant about them not recording to send them questions instead because they're an important witness? And we went back and forth on that a bit, right? Because you don't really, they could have someone else helping them answer the questions. It could be lawyered up. You don't get a credibility determination. You don't get a read on them.
Follow-up
Right.
questions, right? Because like it's nice to follow the trail of what someone's telling you, and often there are things that you didn't expect.
Exactly.
Now, if it's a very narrow issue, and you don't really, there's probably not that many other things that might come up, like that would be an option, instead of that, but
It would not be our preference, I mean, or recommendation. I mean, if we were conducting the investigations, but we were bouncing that idea off of one another a couple of days ago when we were acting this out.
And I mean, a neutral fact finder, in terms of like, what's the risk if they actually if they record you? Because again, I do assume that I maybe am recording, even if I start all my interviews with, I'm not recording this and I expect you're not going to be either. Because they don't have to announce it, because I am in Minnesota.
Mhm.
And so, in that case, I think, if you're a neutral and you're asking open-ended questions, right? Like you're just asking the things. So the things that you could do wrong are theoretically fairly limited, right? Because they're the ones that are providing the answers, right? So,
Right.
So that's maybe just food for thought on whether that's, how big of a concern that might really be. If you are in a two-party recording state, I think you could change the instruction at the outset and just affirmatively say, I'm not recording this and I do not consent to being recorded.
Yeah.
So that it's very clear to the witness that it's unlawful to record you.
And if they do record, then that you're going to be on the record saying you didn't consent. So that's a protectionary measure that you absolutely should take. What if we have a phone call, right? So let's say you're Zooming or something, doing a Zoom investigation, which have become way more common at this point in time, and you're in Minnesota and the person is, or either way, we've got one person that's in a one-party state and one that's in the two-party state that's participating in this investigation.
Yeah, I think you need to like carefully look at the law on that, right? And it may just be that because if the witness is in the two-party, right,
Absolutely.
you know, then it's not gonna work. Now, again, if you're not recording to begin with, like, that's not gonna be a legal risk to you. But it may be that just shoring up like what you think applicable law,
You should, absolutely should.
right,
Yes.
is on that, so that you know kind of how to provide that instruction at the outset.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate again, of those 18 states that we're dubbing as two-party consent states, there are, I mean, I would say close to 10 of them that while they're considered two-party consent states, they're very situation specific. So you really do need to dig into that on a case-by-case basis.
Right, I mean, another thing, so, Amy, what if the witness says, well, do I need a lawyer? Like, so what is this about? Like, do I need a lawyer? Like, what should you say as the investigator?
Well, I think that that's our next scenario. So thank you for
Okay,
for
there you
leading us
go.
right into it. So this will be done by, so demand for a lawyer is this scenario. And this is going to be Abby and Olivia.
Thank you for meeting with me. Before we begin,
Look, I'm happy to meet with you, but I don't want to do this without a lawyer.
this isn't a lawsuit. You don't have a right to a lawyer. As I was saying,
I do have a right to a lawyer, however. I've had a lawyer before and they've told me that I always have a right to have a lawyer present when I'm talking to somebody else on the other side. So if you're not going to respect my rights and I need a lawyer to give me and allow me to have a lawyer, I'm not going to talk to you today.
you're lost. We'll just assume you're guilty as charged.
Well, then that's fine. I'm leaving.
Okay, scene. Then the other scenario.
Thanks for meeting with me. Before we begin,
Look, again, I'm happy to talk to you, but I'm not meeting with you unless I have my lawyer present.
I appreciate your concern. First, I want you to know that there is no lawsuit against you. The point of this interview is to gather information. It would be highly beneficial for you to stay so we can learn about your side of the story, which is important to us. If you fail to do so, we will be forced to make decisions without understanding your perspective. We all just want to get a balanced perspective of the events that occurred. Does that sound okay? We're happy to address any other concerns as they come up.
Well, I guess if this is just about gathering information, it wouldn't hurt to start the conversation. You're right. If I feel uncomfortable, I'll just let you know.
End of scene. So, Laura, I know that you've been in this situation before, in which one of the witnesses that you were interviewing said they wanted counsel. And so what did you do?
Well, I mean, the first thing is to tell them, and of course, like, if you are a lawyer yourself, even more so, but it's like, I can't provide you with legal advice, right? So that's, a question you're gonna have to answer yourself, but I have just been informed that this is, an internal complaint and we're just trying to understand what happened. So, it's not clear to me that that would be necessary, but like, I can't, answer that question for you, right? So I think you want to make sure that you're, telling them that, but at the same time, hopefully not, I mean, like, introducing a lawyer into the mix is not helpful, like, to be clear, right? So like, all other things being equal, you would prefer that that not be the case if there isn't a lawyer already, right? Like,
Right.
if there is a lawyer already, that's just going to be part of what you're gonna have to deal with. And, you know, kind of just to, flash forward to that, like, if the person, is represented already,
Right.
they will likely not allow their, client to be interviewed without them present. And so in that case, I will, consider allowing the person to participate, provided that, they are a potted plant, right? You know, not speaking, not coaching, like, you're wanting to hear from the witness directly. And just, but like, the reality is there's, very little chance that someone who's represented is going to, allow you to participate, or allow their client to participate in an interview without them present. And if it's an important witness and you really want to find out what happened so that you
Yeah.
can investigate it, which is, what happened, in a case I had recently, we really did need to hear from that person. And so that was just part of what we had to manage. So.
And have you ever had a situation, I have not, and I'm not sure if you have either, in which you did permit the lawyer was present, and they were being obstreperous or causing problems within the investigation?
I haven't really, although if that did happen, I think we would have to break and discuss that, because it's like, what's the point of that, right?
Yeah.
Because like, at that point, if you're just hearing from the lawyer or the lawyer's coaching, I think what's happened, more often though, is that there's all sorts of weird breaks, right? And so then it's
Yeah.
like it's clear that the witness is being coached, in between, but instead of the witness like having the lawyer like clearly put the words in the
Right.
mouth of the witness when and doing the investigation. So
Yeah, and another thing, speaking of before we get into another scenario too, I think that this would be worthwhile to talk about now. When you mention that abnormal, weird breaks and things like that. So, since COVID, I know that, you in particular have had an inordinate amount of investigations and most being conducted on Zoom. And so, have you found that there are more breaks that tend to be happening while you're doing these on Zoom, which raise some red flags for you about, are they communicating with someone? Anything like that you've noticed that seems more problematic now that we've moved into a lot more Zoom?
yeah,
interviews?
I don't know that I've had more breaks as a result of that. I do think that, I mean, like, this is not really answering your question, but in terms of like the virtual investigation, like
I was gonna-
pros
yeah.
and cons of that,
Yes,
right?
we should
To some
just talk
degree,
about it
is
now.
that
Yeah.
I think in some ways, it has been nice to do investigations virtually and not just like, so it's easy on the investigator, to kind of schedule and what have you. I think that, the witnesses often feel more comfortable being interviewed in their own home. They're outside of work. They're not as worried that a coworker is going to hear what's happening. I feel like there's been a level of feeling relaxed and forthcoming in the interviews, that I feel like is harder to accomplish when like somebody has been brought into a conference room and I'm there and like,
Well, and
right, and it's like more stressful.
Well, and their colleagues will be
Yeah,
seeing them being
like,
marched
who's
in and
this-
out of this conference
Right, like
room.
who's this woman at the end of the hall? Like what's going on with that?
Yeah.
Chatter about that internally. If they just go home and then they're on Zoom themselves. I have found that that has actually been a really nice development. And then it's also you want to have the interviews where you could see the person. Like so sometimes there's well, no, I don't know how, I think like very few people don't understand how to get on a Zoom call or a Teams call now, which is a really, positive development out of all of the things that we had to deal with COVID, right?
Right.
Because like you want to be able to look them in the eye. And, if part of what you're doing is gathering facts and part of what you're doing is credibility determinations, you want to look at the body language and like, are they looking you in the eye? Are they acting strange when they answer a certain thing? All which might kind of be part of what you're coming up with for credibility determination. So I did have one lawyer talk to the witness, like I had to go off camera for a second to kind of address something. And so I just went off camera, but I could still hear. And then like the lawyer's talking to the witness, like, oh, you're doing a good job, whatever. And I was like, I still can hear everything you're saying. So welcome to Zoom. But that was the only thing I really had come up with a break. But all things to like, I mean, they're all what you're just trying to determine what happened.
Right.
And like weird breaks or kind of convenient shifts in what someone says after a break is all just part of like whether you believe the person may be credible, right? You know, because that's what you're trying to determine.
Mhm.
So all of those things are kind of gonna go into what you are learning and appreciating as you come to a conclusion.
One thing I wanted to go back to before we move into the next scenario, scenario 5, with the tricky questions kind of aspect, is with regard to a lawyer being present. If any of you have a union workforce, right, in their collective bargaining agreements, that's one thing I did want to bring up, that they may be entitled to have an attorney present. So just keep that in mind. The comments we were making before were more of in the, no labor union, no union involved, no collective bargaining agreements, and whether you could have a say in whether or not they can have counsel there. So,
Right, and that would be a union rep. That would
absolutely.
be, they're not
Yep.
necessarily a lawyer.
But it could be a lawyer too. Okay, great. Let's move into scenario 5. This one is when the witness makes a demand for someone else to be there, a parent or otherwise. Olivia and Steven.
Thank you for meeting with me today.
Oh, wait a minute. You guys are assuming the employee is above the age of 18.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Thank you for meeting with me today. Before we begin,
Look, I'm happy to meet with you, but I'm not really ready to meet with you unless my parent is able to come too.
aren't you an adult? Like, you don't need your mom or your dad here. Why would you need your mom present? Aren't you like 25?
Look, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Just good luck asking someone else. Scene.
Scene. Okay. All right. Next one.
Thank you for meeting with me today. Before we begin, I would just
Look.
like to,
I'm happy to meet with you, but I would really feel comfortable only meeting with you unless my mom's able to come too.
can I ask you why you would like your mom to be here?
I just feel really uncomfortable talking about the Christmas party, given, the really gross things that my boss said to me. And I just want her there to sit in as emotional support.
Well, in that case, I completely understand. She can certainly attend if she's there to support you emotionally, but it will be important for me to hear from you directly. And hopefully she can just sit there and just be there to emotionally support you.
I think she'd be fine with that.
Okay.
End of scene. I don't know if any of you out here have had this request. So let's talk about it. This, as we set that scene, this is assuming the employee is above the age of 18. Obviously, if you have an employee that is younger than 18, a minor, they absolutely have the right to have their parent present. And I had that. We had a situation years ago in which we were representing franchises of fast food restaurants. And so there, as you can imagine, there were a lot of underage kids working there. One of the witnesses in particular, I interviewed him on the phone, and before, when we reached out, his mom said, "I need to be present." I said, "Absolutely." And she just listened in on the phone. So I've actually had that situation happen. I have not had where someone who is of adult age ask for their parent to be present. Laura, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of you probably have had parents weighing in on various personnel issues with,
Especially in this day and
right,
age.
so with I want to talk about how my child is being treated, right? I mean, and all of that, you can't be talking to a parent without the employee's consent about their employment, right? So part of what we wanted to illustrate with this particular scenario or scenarios was that you don't want to just foreclose the
Mhm.
possibility that there might be an appropriate reason why that might happen, right? So if you're just like, give me a break, you're 25, right? Like we're not dealing with this. Like you are an adult, like we're not talking to your parent, like they can't be around, like that's ridiculous. That's why when we did the good scenario, it was the investigator is trying to understand the reason for the request, right? So that at least you're getting the information so you can evaluate whether that's an appropriate thing. And if it is a sensitive issue, and I have had it happen where there was something, and sometimes it could be even more sensitive than this was, which was just like gross words. Maybe it's even more sensitive in a way that you want to, because the purpose is for you to determine what happened in a situation so that the company can take prompt remedial action. And if the alternative is the person shuts down and doesn't speak to you, that's not going to help you, right? So like if really a condition of getting the information is that the person in a sensitive situation has a support person there, you should absolutely consider agreeing to that, right? And that's why we included things of like, but just so you know, it's going to be important for us to hear from you directly, because just like with the lawyer, you don't want the support person or parent to be putting words in the person's mouth in a way that then you're really not getting their side of the story, because the person to whom this happened is the one that has the firsthand information. The other person is just, necessarily kind of the way we wrote it does not have firsthand
Right,
information.
it could be,
So-
it could be a 28-year-old female who's been sexually harassed or even assaulted, God forbid, and their best friend, right? They want to have their best friend there
Right,
for
or
initial
their
support, right?
partner, or, I have agreed to all sorts of
Yes.
people that would fall into this category, especially if it is an important witness that I really need to talk to.
Yeah.
So, and then again, like you want to, in that situation, if there is something where it's very sensitive and maybe the support person is overzealous, you just have to politely try to interject to say, listen, you know what, I really, I don't want to be impolite here, but I can't, like we can't kind of continue like this. I do need to really hear from this person, but I appreciate that you're there for them, right? But like, can we really get back to having me hear directly from them about it? And like, some additional pieces on that is that if that person, I would have Kleenex ready, I would have water ready, this is assuming it's in person, and I would say if there's any time that you need a break, just let me know. Like, that's kind of good practice anyway, but especially if it's something that's more sensitive, so that you look thoughtful in the manner in which you're trying to gather information and on a sensitive topic.
Well, that brings me to another question. I just thought about this. So when you're doing these on, you've been conducting a lot of them on Zoom. And do you ask, because this is also kind of akin to if you're doing, from my perspective, doing a deposition, right, of a third party, if we're talking about litigation. So let's say the investigation led to litigation. And when you've got a deponent on the other side, you ask them, is there anyone present in the room? And a lot of times we actually even ask them to scan the room with their laptop or whatever, their phone, whatever they're using. So is that something that you have done to understand whether or not there really is a third party? They haven't asked, okay, this is a situation where they haven't requested one.
So I have, I definitely ask, so I assume that, you're just here by yourself, right? I have not asked somebody to scan.
Okay.
Like, I think that, that perhaps.
Chills it.
Right.
Mhm.
Kind of starts off with a feeling of distrust that you don't want to have set the stage, right? Because like you want that person to trust that you are going to be a neutral, right? That you're not just, and let's say you work for the company that like, okay, that you're just gonna do whatever the company says, you're just a hired gun, like you don't care. You're really not trying to get to the bottom of anything. Like, again, you want to look like you are a trusted neutral and that you're going to listen. And I think kind of asking like, okay, like you said no one's there, but prove it, right? I want you to scan it right away is likely not it would get you the information and unless the person can scurry away really quick, but it would, I think, undercut what you're trying to accomplish with establishing that trust at the outset.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we are done with the scenarios, these 5 kind of tricky questions that we've we've been presented with over a course of our 20-some years of practice, and thought that some of you probably have too, and maybe weren't sure exactly how to handle it. So we wanted to provide that for you. And with the last remaining minutes, I think another important topic that you all might be interested in that we wanted to touch on if we had time, and it looks like we've got about 10 minutes, is the idea of, okay, do I conduct this investigation internally as the HR professional? Or is this something that I really should get a third party involved? So whomever that is, right? Whether it's, your law firm, Laura, myself, somebody else. And so talking about figuring out those considerations for that. And so, Laura, thinking about those kinds of things, what would you say, the kind of the pros and cons of internal versus external?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first real data point on that is what is the complaint about, right? So let's say you are internal counsel, or you're an internal HR person. And let's say in both instances, you report to the CEO. This is probably pretty obvious, but like if the complaint is about the CEO, that is going to present a challenge, both practically and legally, if you do the investigation, because the presumption will be that it's a whitewash.
Yeah.
That you just were going to do, like it's your boss that the complaint is about. So of course you're going to come to the conclusion that there was no wrongdoing, because there's too much pressure on you to come to a different conclusion. So if it is anybody that is above you in the reporting chain, it is important to consider having somebody outside of that can actually look as if they are a neutral and aren't biased to come to a different conclusion because it's somebody that is their boss.
Absolutely. Exactly. And so when you reach that decision that you're going to hire out, there are some considerations, right? You should be thinking about when you're determining who you're gonna retain. And so some of those might be, I don't know, if it's the race or the sex of the person, right? Whose complaint, right? And so is that going to make a difference in terms of outside? I think you've had that situation actually pretty recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to be thoughtful about the investigator that you choose if you're hiring somebody out, right? And so like if there is if it is somebody that where they're complaining about gender discrimination, would that person find it to be more trustworthy to have a female investigator versus a male investigator? There's not a like absolute right answer to that question, but it's possible given the given the allegations, that it might be better to choose someone. So if it's like, oh, okay, like that's nice. There's another white male that, which is the whole thing I've been complaining about. And now you're sending me a white male as the investigator to take my concern seriously. I already feel that this isn't going to go well for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you want to, again, it's not necessarily that that's going to disqualify somebody, but at the same time, and maybe it's even not just the gender, maybe it's just temperament, right? Like, is there somebody that is going to seem like they are more hard-nosed versus not,
empathetic,
or
right?
Empathetic or not, or if it's somebody that, let's say it's a very grouchy CEO that the complaint is about, and that they aren't, that they're going to try to run circles around some investigator. You're going to need somebody that is pretty savvy,
Right.
that isn't going to be able to be swayed or like kind of just isn't up to the task if that person is really challenging in that interview, right? So all of those types of things, I think, temperament, gender, race, like But with the idea being not that you're like, oh, I'm gonna, like, this is cute, I'm gonna do this to take that off the table. It's really with the idea of, what is the best person so that the person that is complaining is going to not have, unnecessary arguments that this wasn't a
Yes.
fair and impartial investigation. And then like, and you know, maybe like less cynical and more hopeful is that they actually will feel heard. And that maybe we can get this addressed, right? And resolved, because like, you know, you want these things to get uh, properly reviewed so that the company can make a decision. And then, and a lot of times, you know, most employees that go to an employment litigator uh, don't feel heard for some reason, right? And so like if they have complained and there was an investigation, you do want to make sure to the greatest extent possible, you can only control what you can control, right? But that
Yeah.
that the person did have an opportunity to tell this side of the story, and in a lot of cases, like you can actually get it resolved, and then the person will still work there, and maybe you can really right the ship.
Absolutely. And with our last few minutes, so let's say you make the determination for whatever reason, we're gonna hire out a third party. We're gonna contact our lawyer or some outside investigation that investigator you've used in the past, and you think they're gonna fit the bill. Something else that you need to be really thoughtful about is what is the scope of the assignment, right? That's being provided to this outside third-party investigator. And so that can look like a lot of different things, right? And so much of it depends on what the complaint is and what the investigation really needs to be. So some of those things, right, Laura, would be, I mean, is it just simply fact finding? Are you asking them to make a credibility determination? In there,
Probably so, right? Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Report or no report?
Right, and so on that, I'd say, I never decide that until I know what the answer is, right? Like I wanna, ensure that I know what the findings are before I'm deciding that that's gonna be in writing.
And when you say that, when you say that, are
with
you
the
talking?
report, right?
Yeah, so are you saying you are saying that as the person who retains an outside investigator, and you tell them you never sign up immediately, I want a written report, because you're gonna want
Yeah,
a
if
verbal.
I'm making the decision and I'm hiring it out,
Yep.
like 100%, I am never deciding that until I know, because otherwise you're sort of predetermining, like, what if I mean, and sometimes this happens, like, there's just bad things that are
Yeah,
discovered,
absolutely.
right? Like that, you know, that you're gonna have to deal with. But like, if you end up in litigation, you don't want to be creating a bad record for yourself unnecessarily, right?
Right.
So, the, so all of that I think is like really important to be thinking about. But, just to kind of get back to your scope comment.
Yeah.
So, I really emphasize that as an important thing to determine at the beginning,
Yes.
because and especially it gives guidance and cover to the investigator, because if like there is somebody where uh, there's like, let's say the scope of the investigation is here, but there's all sorts of like chatter and discussion all around this, or just like things that people are generally like would like to complain about, right? And so if as an investigator, someone's like, well, you know, I've been waiting for somebody to talk to me about these things, and I am like, and this happens, right?
Yeah,
And it
it
gets
sure
off
does.
on a huge tangent.
Yes.
So then you can say,
And then they decide to complain about other things.
yeah, and by the
yes.
by, like,
Yes.
you know, like,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
so glad I have this forum
Yeah.
in which to like chat about some of the things that I.
Let me tell you about what happened 2 years
mean,
ago.
right, and I was like, okay, like time out, like, that is outside the scope of my assignment.
Yeah.
Right, so I've only been retained to look at this, right, you know, and so if that's something that you have additional, things or questions about, I would, I'll refer them back to someone, right?
Right.
You know, so it's not, because again, you don't want to like, suggest you're not listening, or that you don't care, or like, right? Because again, you're trying to be a trustworthy person to talk to them. It's just like, that's simply not something I've been retained to look at, right? And so like, if you, and scoping that does help everybody be on the
Yeah.
same page about that. But I think, like I said, gives really a lot of, and if you're doing the internal one and you're needing to talk to people within your company about that, like having everybody, okay, what's in the scope, what's outside of the scope, so that we're just, it's not just a referendum on the person that's being complained about.
Exactly.
Or let's run down all the people that don't like him, or, right, or let's like, if that's not the complaint.
Right. Great. Okay, well, I know that we have hit our time and want to be respectful of all of yours. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this to be informative. And obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the team that you see here. Happy to answer any questions. And the other thing real quick, we will be sending out in a follow-up email a 2-page sheet for you guys that's an investigation do's and don'ts. So we thought would be a helpful tip sheet for all of you. And so thanks again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.